The title poem concerning the Atlas of Scotland is about the Blow Atlas of Scotland, which was the first Atlas of Scotland. It was published in the 17th century. It was published in Amsterdam, and it was published after many years, about 30 years of toing and froing, letters going back and forward between Scotland and the publishers in Amsterdam. John Blow was the son of the man who started it off, and they used in Scotland Timothy Pont's sketch maps of Scotland, and the person who was the leading correspondent was a man, Sir John Scott of Scott-Starvet. So this is John Blow writing to Sir John Scott of Scott-Starvet in 1642, seeking information, details about Scotland. When I learned that your lordship had shown to His Royal Majesty on Charles I's unhappy visit to Scotland the proofs of maps previously sent by me to be corrected, I wondered what he could have made of them. Much in them was held in suspense, as is the case in these fresher efforts, which, though a little tidier, still lack, for perfection's sake, ornaments, titles, distances, and other such matters. For embellishment, I should be greatly assisted by knowledge of the advantages of each region. That is to say, what crops each produces, what metals it has, what animals it bears or nourishes, and so on. I ask this, for much presents itself to people living there, which is less obvious to me, who must rely in this whole enterprise on the tongues and hands of many men never met in their own domicile or here in Amsterdam. It is over 20 years since, for the common good of your lordship's country and of the commonwealth of literature, my father began with you to pull from darkness the first atlas of your land. My father planned this, the 5th volume of his geographical theatre, as a service to posterity. Yet we are still wanting many maps, among them Sutherland, Strathleith, Assynt, Ross, Lochaber, and Lorne. Would that some hope remained of uncovering these, for the Scotland we wish to deliver is not one that shadows envelope, but one lit and gleaming in all its parts. So too we desire the delineations of cities, and the sightings of all castles of note. Most necessary of all are the arms or bearings with the names of dukes, earls, or barons, or other illustrious men, those whom you judge it expedient that we inscribe on our fine copper plates. These would add splendour to the maps and to descriptions of the genealogy of those with a distinguished lineage. On such depends the furtherance of all our plans. We have moved far in troubled times, firm in the belief our colours will long outlast them. The fractured depictions with which we began, the blanks which were without utterance, are being addressed. We have recovered much of what was lost. We have given shape and polish to what had been deformed. Soon the Scotland that had been partial will emerge into full, clear light. For that, I await the corrections I have outlined. When I was applying for this residency at the National Library of Scotland, I had to think, why I love maps. And much of my recent love of maps comes from running through the Galloway countryside around Dumfries where I live. And a very good friend of mine, Frank, was the guy that I used to run with. And maps, I think, the fascination is, the create expectation and the kind of encode memory. They save memories for us. So that's really what this poem, I hope, does. Map Man. For 20 years, Frank was my map man. He'd arrive with his kit bag, map in hand, a spring in every step. Of course, we had our regular runs, ones we could do almost blindfold, but for the weekend, something special. Frank laid the map on the table, like it was the cover of a book whose story you didn't yet know. Troston, Ettrick, Colochan, Shawhead, Glenkiln. Now see where these two roads meet? Yes, Frank, got you. This is where we're going to park. We're going to run up this track. There's an old farm up there. I'm reminded of my love of old farms, the simple geometry of them, the drama of the farmyard, how you feel it in each of your senses. If it's quiet, we'll run through the yard. After the farm, the track narrows. Can you make it out? Yes, it's a thread. It's the width of a running shoe. We're running with sure-footed sheep, rabbits, and deer. Great, Frank. And sometimes, as you climb, because we're starting to climb by now, you see buzzards. I see them already, right where Frank's finger is, circling above us. We've got to keep moving. Now, says Frank, a hint of a smile more, it gets really steep. My heart lunges at the contour lines, narrowing ever further. Then I think, great Frank, let it be steep as it likes. Sometimes thigh muscles need to ache before they can burn. And once we're over the top, there's a forest on the way down, and this forest, it's thick and it's dark and it's deep, and I'm thinking, great Frank, let the forest be dark, let it be deep, let it feel as if we'll never get out of it. But already I'm seeing us bursting out of that darkness. We're the first flowers of spring. Great Frank. And then it's a long way home. And his finger describes a great arcing road back to the car. Wow, that's far, Frank. But I'm thinking, yes, be far. Be beyond my imagining. Make it so far that the heart of this map will bear our traces. Because what we're going to do is, we're going to run. Yes, Frank. Yes, Frank. Oh, yes, Frank. Run till the landscape runs us. And the weather, Frank, I'm sure might rain a bit. And I'm thinking, rain will be in your face. Wind will curse louder than you. Sun will be all over you. Snow, wind, hail, and rain. Why, thank you. You've just turned this into a hero run. Great, Frank. All great. Except my ankle went 2 years ago now, just after we managed an old favourite for Frank's 70th. It was far from our longest run, but it was a hero run for all that. I'm left wondering now whether, for cumulative happiness, much has exceeded those map-planned runs with Frank. Troston, Ettrick, Colochan, Shawhead, Glenkiln. Each name glows in its own firmament. And I think if God's house has many mansions, one of them is surely papered with maps. Thank you. There's one of the things in the Bartholomew's collection is a whole set of engravings, because the maps were engraved in copper plates, and the engraver could take months to engrave a map which he was engraving upside down and back to front, starting from who knows where, what point he picked to start. And but I like to think that at some point the landscape must have started to make sense to him. He must have started to inhabit it. There's a poem called The Engraver. 4 months I'd spend bent over a sheet of copper, 2 feet by 2, glinting like a coal scuttle on my worktop. The engraver's task to inscribe there the reverse image of a map. Always I worked away from the body, pushing thin threads through the metal. I was tight in as a dog in a trail. Where I began, I soon forgot. Where I'll end, you'll never know. This map too keeps its secrets. In time, a density of effects formed below my blind hand. Few will be as intimate with its contours as I was, or with the willfulness of a river, its horseshoe turns, its hidden gullies through the marked fields. I followed wherever it went, a nib, a beak, a blade on the ice. I tracked the inverted poetry of place. Yet there came a time when I'd lift my head, not godlike or summit sure, but almost casually, in the way of someone lost in a book on a speeding train. He glances up on an evening when a coppery light slants across the sky to see the landscape unfold before him, lay itself out without guile. He can read its familiar fields, its farms, the sailing boat on the molten river, which reminds him of a dhow he once saw engraved in a silent world, the breeze tipping its sail gently towards the water. One of the great treasures of the museum, the National Library of Scotland, is the original book plate that was used in Treasure Island. And so they have that copper plate. And I don't know if you know the story of Treasure Island. You know, it's either Stevenson doodles the map himself, or else he comes in and his stepson is doodling a map, and Stevenson starts to doodle on it, and he names a place, you know, like Skull Bay or Skull Island, I think it is, Skull Island, and he starts putting crosses on it, and he said, when he was doing it, this story of Treasure Island just immediately came to him, almost fully formed. And then what happened was, I think it was in sending this sketch map down to the publisher, it got lost. And so Stevenson then had to reconstruct the map using the text. And he said that wasn't nearly so much fun. So this is a poem. There's a poem called, really imaginatively, Treasure Island. And I came across a quote sometime after I'd written it. I think captures quite well what I think we're. It's by Jean Baudrillard, and it's, we are fascinated by what has been created because the moment of creation cannot be reproduced. So this is it. And Stevenson wrote in a letter that, you know, he said, you know, harbours pleased him like sonnets while he was writing, while he was doing this. Treasure Island. Whether it was all by his own hand or come across partially completed by another, with a few strokes it became his and always had been so. He felt he could be drawing it in the sand with a long stick, so sure was his hold on its shape, or with a finger daubing it out with mud or clay. He marvelled at each gesture, how each mark became what it designated, and so coves, rocks, hills, and forests formed spontaneously in his mind as they were born upon the map. Harbours pleased him like sonnets. He dreamt he'd drawn the map before and watched with interest as his long, thin fingers placed there 3 crosses, 2 in the north, 1 in the south, with utmost assurance. But then he'd seen the map all his life, on the shadows of the sick room wall, on light playing through leaves. And a story sprang from it now, as it had on every other occasion. Of course, the map had to be lost. The foot had to brush it from the sand, the careless hand devour it. For the imprint is never the imagination, netting pictures, voices, and shadows, massing, shimmering, and holding off till the moment is perfect. Thereafter, the reenactment. He summons cartographer and engraver. He picks over the bones of his story so that the story may begin. Speaking of maps and the imagination, a sort of map of the imagination for John Ford was Monument Valley, and he revisited it again and again when he was making his films. And this is a poem out of this wonderful book, Double Bill, poems inspired by popular culture, poems about films and television, two poems side by side. It's wonderful, it's pure pleasure. The editor's sitting there, but I would say it anyway. This is pure pleasure. And I was delighted to write a poem that was too longer than I'd been asked for, and so thank you, editor, for your indulgence there. This is a poem called The Searchers, and if you have never seen the film, it's wonderful. I mean, John Wayne's amazing in it. And he plays Ethan, who's this embittered character, and one of his sayings is, "That'll be the day." You know, people say to you, "I'll teach you a lesson," and Ethan goes, "That'll be the day." So this is my understanding of what the film's telling us, The Searchers. My understanding so far, that bitterness ruptures a man's narrative long after its cause has ended, that we'd follow some men as we had once our fathers, when we knew our fathers by smell, like beasts that once we knew. My understanding so far, that bitterness ruptures a man's narrative long after its cause has ended, that we'd follow some men as we had once our fathers, when we knew our fathers by smell like beasts, that once we knew our fathers as tamed, we needed other men we could follow into the dark brunt of life, such men as were careless of themselves, rare as leopards. That there are those who will not let go of whatever they fix on, be they hunters, artists, or mystics, and among them some won't see losing even their lives as defeat. That love and hate can be lit by the same flame and can bind in the same way, which is why we have to be guided by what lies between the two, by that which is nameless. That you stand on one side of the threshold or the other, on one side the lamplit comfort of home and family, on the other nothing, neither mountain, desert, or rock that cares, and that there is something noble in walking knowingly back into that brightness. And that there is also nothing, not a horse, a buffalo, or a dog, lonelier than a man in the red dustscape of the world. That a philosophy lives or dies, not through erudition or skill in speech, but on the lips of who says it and by how they live it out. That life is its own agency, and its purpose is to reveal the true nature of a man or the true nature of a woman, and this can turn in a moment on an act of kindness, compassion, or love. And is that then all there is to know? That'll be the day. I was in connected with a project that involved me going to Lagos recently, and before I was about to go, my wife had a stroke that cost her part of her vision. But I'd read a lot about Lagos, and I was kind of halfway there in my imagination. So this poem's about how the difficulty of turning the tanker around and sort of half living in two places. And because I've since been to Lagos, it's also, it encompasses memories as well. So it's like the poem as a map, in a way. This is Lagos, and I wrote this obviously before I went. Tolu is my poet exchange person, and Makoko is the name of a slum there, one of these huge 5 million people slums built in stills. This is Lagos, which is what people say. They don't say welcome to Lagos. They say there's a sign that says, this is Lagos. In other words, deal with it, you know? This is Lagos. A feather of blood seeped unannounced into your brain. No one could catch it. No one could smooth it back into the flow of service. It took with it, tiny as it was, a quarter of your world. Of course, I could not leave you then, but I was too far gone already to stay. So this is Lagos. The tepid air is layered and vegetal. So many flowers, I peer through them to watch the TV. Our cat samples their waters as if they were the finest moths. Each night, whole families pour into Lagos, drifting up the Nith on makeshift skiffs or threading their way over the smallest roads that lead from the impoverished south. They camp under bridges washed by grey light, or in our driveways and doorways, huddling against unfamiliar chills. But by morning, when I go for my paper, they have melted into the gunmetal dawn. No one rests if he wants to eat in Lagos. One side of the road is forever gridlocked, though your blind spot blinds you to the hawkers at the lights, the beggars, the children that are not children anymore. While on the other side of the road, we fly to the hospital like egrets up a river course. The tolu, the hedgerows around Lagos sing yes to whatever there is. It's too early yet for berries, but there's purple vetch, cow parsley, celandine. I could go on, but you'll know each of these names is a secret in Lagos. Whisper one in Makoko, and the feather of your breath will carry a memory of plucked green from here to there. These are quiet days in Lagos, a time in which to take stock. Love has given me these slow days, and I have chosen to spend them here. This is Lagos. Let the city read me, who knows what story it will tell. I'll finish with a poem about reading. Peggy told me that she had in her mind that this was a festival about reading as much as writing. So this is a poem about reading. A little nod to Dundee in it. I read because the book is a tent and my imagination a nomad. I read because of Robin Hood, Shadow the Sheepdog, and the Hobbyas. I read because of Ur Wully and the Bruins. I read because at 7 when I finished Biggles Goes to School, I felt a loss so strange, tears came to my eyes. I read because Mr. Bruce took us down into the pit and left us with the swinging pendulum. I read because I only have one life, but infinite ways to live it. I read because the space we share now is not the only space, and the time we live in now needs mined and projected beyond the miracle of the moment. I read because of Owen Wister, Zane Grey, Oliver Strange, and Evan Evans' 2 neglected masterpieces, Montana Rides and The Song of the Whip. We each have had our genre to bear. I read because I too was once Raskolnikov, as were you and you and you. I read because I have had many appointments in life and time lay heavily before them. I read because, although the world is endlessly interesting, not all plane journeys are. I read because I write. I read because I want to write better. I read because no one ever said to me, this book's not for the likes of you. I read because no book ever closed its door to me, though it was dark as a forest and its path led me nowhere. I read because no book ever said to me, you can't skip me, skim me, abandon me. I read because love put words in my mouth and care brought them on the page before me. I read because I've been spared all the reasons others can't read. Among them, poverty, hunger, war, prejudice, negligence, closing libraries as if their job is somehow done, or taking small, hesitant children whose light vowels contain more pain than we can imagine and testing them close to destruction. I read because words can dance. I read because words make maps that show me where I am, where I have been, and where I want to go. I read because if language is a landscape, books are the road I have taken. I read because each peach, pear, plum, 4 words that together form a perfect archive of love and memory. I read to make sense of, to empathise with, to self-nourish. I read because I need companions. I read because we read. I read because I need to reread. I read to pay attention, for there are evil books, slack books, shallow books, exploitative books, as many kinds of books as there are people, and we need to know them too. I read because, as 12-year-old Henry once told me on the shores of Lake Malawi, education is the key, and reading is the key to education. I read because, as Joseph Brodsky once said, freedom is for going to the library.